Today, we will talk about how to build a lasting relationship with your clients. That's a subject that is talking about retention. This is something we have already talked, but today we wanted to dig deeper into the subject with Hélène. Hi, Hélène.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So Hélène has already made a webinar with us, but it was in French. So if you are bilingual, you can truly go see it. It was super great. I don't really remember the exact title we have put, but we have talked about our techniques for managing and to be a better coach. Today, she's coming back to us in English that time to talk about relationship. Hélène, do you want to present yourself a little bit for the people that didn't have the chance to watch the previous?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And the previous one, I think, was called Comment bâtir une relation avec vos clients. Okay. And so for those that do not speak French, this is a good French-English lesson. So the translation for that would be, our title for today is How to Build a Lasting Relationship with Your Clients. And so my name is Hélène, or Hélène en français. Like Etienne, I'm very bilingual and a proud Canadian. And I currently reside, yeah, I see Etienne waving his hand, that's great. I reside, and Etienne lives in Quebec on the East Coast, and I'm on the West Coast in Vancouver, British Columbia. I've been working as an occupational therapist for the past 20 years, and 14 years into my career, I discovered this coach approach. And it was such a game changer for me for both personally and professionally, that even though I promised my husband I was done with, I just finished my master's of adult education. I'd done a lot of training. I said, okay, I'm done. And we had 2 kids at that time too. I couldn't help it. Like, I had done an introduction to coaching, and then I was like, I couldn't believe the impact it had with my clients. And it was really helping me. And that's what we'll talk a bit about today. It was really helping me with the stuck factors that they had, and not in stuck factors that I kept coming over and over again, and they weren't related to their injury. And so seeing this impact, I then decided to go full throttle, become a professional certified coach, and mix that with my recipe of education. I ended up becoming an entrepreneur because I was so passionate that I found the secret recipe, the secret ingredient in healthcare and for fitness instructors that could help us walk away from that path of burnout, could help us to improve the rapport with our clients. And so, long story short, I developed a methodology, a certification program where we don't have to go and go through as many steps as I had to, because I kind of filled a gap that was needed in healthcare, essentially. And so today we talk. Yeah, we
are really glad. Yeah, and we're really glad to have you today to talk about this subject. It's really something super interesting for people, and even more in November, where we are, because everybody will have the rush of January. We all know the new resolution, but the problem is that I think it's over 60% of people leaving their good resolution before February, mid-February. So this is the perfect moment for now understanding the main concept Hélène will teach us today, to then start to apply it, maybe to do another for a training with Hélène to push further, and then to be ready for January for keeping your clients for real.
And remind me, if I forget, there is a tool I actually put together, because the data, as we know, is not great about New Year's resolution, as you just said, most of us. And so I developed this tool called the Dive-In Goals. So remind me to make sure I mention it so that they can grab it for free, because this could be a neat tool they could play with for the new year.
Perfect. So we will put the handbook. I think it's the workbook. That we have. I will put it at the end for sure, so people, you can download it and take care of using it before the New Year resolution.
Perfect. And speaking,
I think she left everybody instead of just maybe on mute or I don't know. For everybody, while she's coming back because she has left, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to ask them in the chat on your right. I will take care of asking it to Hélène. So Hélène, we are all ready. You can start. Just question of not leaving that different button.
I know, right? I'm learning that the hard way. Yes, I see the proper arrow now. So here are our learning objectives that I put together to support us, because one of the key things that can help us to build that rapport and maintain that relationship with our clients is using that coach approach. And so the data, the research is quite clear on this, and it's looking at how do we do that in our area of practice as fitness coaches, and looking at that when. So when should I pull out that coaching card? So we're going to get clear on what coaching is, and also get clear it's not going to always be needed, but when am I going to pull that card? And you know what? What are some of the techniques? There's many, many techniques that we can use to help us get in that coaching mindset. And we don't have to be fully certified coaches to be able to use some of these techniques. A lot of the techniques, they're already embedded in your world. And what we do is we just pull out some of those key techniques that you can start looking at it in a more explicit way versus implicit, if that makes sense. And that way, if we can understand that technique more explicitly, we then make a conscious effort to use it. So that will be our what, our when, and our how. And I'm finding the right arrow. Let me change the side. And this is, as you know, you're used to this process now with me. I'm always designing workbook when I deliver educational content, because I know that if you can take the time to download that workbook, it's intentional that I've built in some filling the gaps or blanks, because it will help you to retain the information. And I didn't share that story with you, Etienne, but our last webinar, someone shared with me that they listened to us while they were walking, right? Which is common. People will listen to their podcast, like either walking or driving. And so they said, I listened to it while I was walking. And then you remembered you mentioned this workbook. So I got back to my office, downloaded the workbook, and they said I tested my memory. And they were able to fill most of the gaps. And I thought, wow, what a great exercise that for those listening now or later if they're driving, or that, because if you do it in that way, it's tapping into your long-term memory versus short-term. And
we put the workbook on the right in the handout section if you want, just to download it, everybody. And then you can use it after to see if you have a good memory or during the call.
Yeah, an additional bonus. And that everything that's in that workbook will be what we cover today. So I know sometimes we can share slides, but the workbook will actually have everything you need and more. Yeah. So here is me, and this is how I explain. I show intentionally a picture of me 20 years ago in my previous life as a figure skater, because that's when I share my story of how I actually have 4 years of training in kinesiology. But if you look at all my letters beside my name, it talks about Bachelor of Science in Occupational Therapy, a Master of Adult Education, and Professional Certified Coach. I'm sadly, to this day, regret that I can't put Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology, even though I did 4 years, but I have a good excuse. And that's because I was working towards becoming, making the team for the synchronized figure skating team for Canada. And this is a great opportunity as well to showcase the need for fitness coaches and being able to use that coach approach, even with someone, especially with someone like me 20 years ago, that was dealing with injuries, and we know the challenges high-level athletes can have, and then B, having that challenge to adjust when that role was no longer, when I was no longer deemed part of the national figure skating team. And so that identity crisis that happens. And so I wish I would have had one of your people in your community and offer me coaching services to help me through that journey and all those life skills that I would have missed because my entire childhood was focused on this was a part-time job for me starting the age of 10. So my childhood, my life skills were very different potentially than a lot of other people. So just a neat little side story I thought we could add. And so on page 4 of your workbook, if you've been able to download it, it has this question here for you. And it's really intentional to ask that question because we'll come back to it later and we'll make that link to how this is related to coach approach and how it's related to building client relationships. And the question is for you. And so maybe Etienne, you can answer if you have a different answer for this time. Mine is still the same as when we did this presentation. Yours too, is it? Yeah.
Still always the coffee. So
still the coffee, and I'm still with the water.
Exactly. So
yeah. So what? That's so funny. You still have it. So maybe we'll make the time for a coaching session. We'll see.
Maybe. But I think I'm less. Like now I'm limited to 2 per day, so that's fine. I think it's better. Oh.
Where were you before? Remind me.
4.
Yeah, I think you cut that down by 50%. That's pretty impressive.
If you say it in percentage, if you say it in percentage, it really looks beautiful. I agree with you. That's a good technique. Yeah, it's a little better.
And so for those that, when we did the French version of this presentation, Etienne and I had a 10-minute coaching conversation about just this question. And the topic was for Etienne to reduce his coffee intake. So that's actually quite neat, Etienne, that we had a 10-minute dialogue. You had the time to really hash that topic and we dove under the iceberg a bit. And we connect 6 months later and it's reduced by 50%. I would say that's a successful 10 minutes of our time.
I agree.
Yeah. So there you go. Here's the power of coaching right then and there. But I'd love to invite you, for those who are watching the recording, to pause at this moment if you'd like and invite you to answer that question for yourself. And so for Etienne, it's something as simple as coffee. And for me, it's something as simple as drinking more water.
And this is one of the things that we're seeing a lot. And I think we did a webinar recently about this subject, but most of the Canadian population or anywhere you are, their goal is that simple. So their goal is that simple, just of a health sport, or just feeling better. And most of the time I see coaches or kinesiologists try to find a super specific goal, like a marathon, like a triathlete or something like that. But the truth is that in the amount of people as the population of Canada, the most majority has a simple goal. So to be able to understand which is the simple goal and to be able to help this person toward that goal is really something important for having enough clients. And one of the problem is that when they arrive in January, they have a specific goal. So you think you are talking about an iceberg. You think that perfect, they have a specific goal, but the truth is that no. Because of January, they have fake a goal that is, I don't know, I want to fit in the jeans or I want to live 20 pounds. But the truth is it's under what they really want. And so if you don't find this, since 3 months, they will live.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up because it really links to that why developing that diving goal. Because what I realized when I got coaching training is there was 4 to 5 other elements that coaches were doing that we were not doing in our world. We were doing SMART goals and we were making beautiful SMART goals. To this day, I still have to write that in every single one of my reports. But what I do is I use the diving goal as a worksheet because I tie it to what's meaningful to them. I try to go down that iceberg, and we'll talk about that as I show a few more slides later. But I really try to get clear on their why to want to do it. And if someone used a coach approach with me to find out, my why for water, it's actually quite meaningful. It's related to a chronic diagnosis. It helps with my energy. It helps with my day-to-day functional impact. And so it sounds so simple, but if someone takes the time to dig deeper, realizes, whoa, like this is actually has a lot of impact for you. If you take your water consistently, or if you fall off track, it really impacts your health and ability to take care of your kids. And, so it really has a ripple effect. So it's kind of neat when you start putting that lens. And of course, it helps to build that relationship when someone takes the time to know the why behind your goal. And if it can tap to your motivations is a bonus. Now I'm making sure I'm finding the right arrow it's in as I switch the slides. And so what we're going to do to start off with is looking at that coaching definition, and we're going to fill in these 3 blanks that you see on page 5 of your workbook. Because this definitely happened to me when I started this coaching training, that I have this perception of what I think coaching is, and it wasn't exactly that. So just even getting clear, what is Hélène talking about when she keeps talking about this coach approach? And it's not my coaches in figure skating that would be, and this was skating 40 years ago, where they're in the middle of the ice and they're yelling at me exactly what to do. And so they're being very, very directive. So that is not the type of coaching that we're talking about. And so I find just all of us having that framework of what are we talking about if we want to use a coach approach with our clients to build that relationship. It's this stuff that we're going to go through. And what's helped me the most is really just start thinking what is coaching and what it isn't. And through my training, I realized that coaching is a equal partnership. And it absolutely is not an unequal partnership. So it definitely is. I'm at the exact same level as my client. And I found for most of us and as fitness instructors, that's pretty easy for us to do, to be in that place of, I'm going to work with this with you and not for you. And I'm not going to do for you. So I find most people do well with this. What coaching is looking forward. And it's not looking backwards. So in that workbook, you've got those 2 columns. And so for those that are using it, I'd invite you to start filling those 2 columns out, because that's what really can help wrap your head around what coaching is and isn't. And that, for me, really helps me to stay in my lane as a coach. So when I have a client in front of me and I find that the dialogue is going towards the past and maybe towards trauma, I start to catch myself and remind myself of this exact same slide and say, okay, Hélène, stay in your lane. You're not a counselor. You're not a psychologist. Now, some of us do have that training. Perfect. You can then switch your hat. But if you don't have that training and you need to stay in your coaching hat, you can bring that dialogue back in the lane where it's going to be comfortable and ethical and safe for the patient and client. And one thing I discovered, because when I first had my coaching session, no one really explained what coaching was to me. And I definitely felt this. I'm like, wow, why are they asking so many questions? And they're not telling me what to do at all. And so someone that is using that coach approach is asking a lot of clarity and curiosity questions. And we'll explore that more in detail. And they're absolutely not being authoritative. That would have been my figure skating coaches would have been more that style back in that day. I know it's changing, which is great, but that would have been my experience. And what coaching is, it really focuses on strengths and it doesn't focus on the problem. And there's actually this quote I like to use is, don't fix it, coach it. It's not about the problem. It's about diving deeper under the iceberg to understand what is this all about, tapping into their strengths so that they can find their own solutions. And it's not going down the iceberg about a problem, which is a different approach. this has been a game changer for my practice. When I say that it's impacting me professionally and personally, so professionally, what it did right away, it helped me walk away from burnout because of this. Because if you use a coach approach, your client is accountable to their action plan, not you. And there's all of these techniques to help empower your clients to be accountable and to want to do those action plans that they themselves set out in your sessions. So it's brilliant. Yeah, I see you nodding.
Yeah, and just it's just little portion of proudness is just that 3 weeks ago we have added in Hexfit a task feature, so you can put daily task, weekly task, or just a sporadic task to your client on the app. So that way, that's it. You can track exactly those kind of things. More like drink 4 liters. You should drink 4 liters per day, and so that your client is able to check. So just parentheses, because it's totally what we wanted to put.
Yeah. So see how you can take, like, once people are trained in this area, they can take it and apply it in everything that they do, right? And how can I help my service, my client, so that they're accountable?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's brilliant. It's what's going to shift us to go from a curative approach to a preventative approach, right? Which we know we need to go towards more. Yeah. Yeah. And this, of course, is probably my favorite one, that in coaching, I always say in the training, if you try to have a coaching dialogue and you walk away and you say, shoot, my client doesn't have an action plan, that means you hopefully had a nice conversation, but it wasn't coaching. So when you have that coaching dialogue, there's always an action plan, which is fantastic. And it's always the client that comes up with this action plan. So coaching, those techniques help you to have that dialogue. And you see the LN in there in that slide it's in? That's how I introduce myself to my English friends to pronounce my name in français.
Oh,
so they just put that LN.
Oh, wow.
So that's why you say, how do you feel after? So if someone asks me how I feel after I've had a coaching session, it's energized, versus where I was 14 years in my practice. I look like that cat at the end of the day, just flopping on the couch, and I'm done. I was just feeling really, really drained and close to that door of burnout. And one of my strategies now is Monday mornings. We know they're a bit tougher for us. I will book a coaching session first thing Monday morning, because this is what it does. I get energized. Great strategy. So here's what it could look like in your workbook on page 5, where you can see on the 2 columns of what coaching is and what coaching isn't. So, and I would invite everyone, there's also a space to reflect, what percentage would you say that you're currently using with your clients right now? Are you living more in the left or the right column? And I'll absolutely share with you, for me, I was 100%, much, much more on that left column. I was not doing coaching. About 60 to 70% of my time, I think I was living in that what is not coaching column. And that just means that I wasn't doing everything I could to build a lasting relationship with my clients. Once I started to live here more and build that equal partnership and use my curiosity, clarity questions, and all my other coaching techniques and support my clients to be more accountable, helping them to have an action plan, move forward, that relationship with my client got stronger, and they were motivated to attend our sessions, and they wanted more. And, it was also preparing them for me to exit, because we can't always be part of that equation. But it helped you because you helped them to be accountable and dive into their strengths. It helped them to feel confident that they can continue their journey without me. And here's our definition again. So now that you look at it, now that we know what is and isn't coaching, it makes it easier to fill in all those 3 blanks. And that first one is partnership. So coaching is a specific conversational partnership. And someone once asked me, Etienne, and I thought that's a brilliant question. They said, so Helen, coaching is it talking then? Is it all the, she said, not that you're just talking, but coaching is talking. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Coaching is you're yapping away. However, you're talking with a purpose. You're having a semi-structured dialogue. It's not just a fun conversation with a friend, but it is absolutely conversation based.
Not just counting the reps discussion. And I think more the time passed, better everybody will understand that. But coaching is not anymore just counting the reps. And it should be really something further, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think once I show, there's an image I'll come later, and it shows the 4 steps of having that dialogue. So it's a very, very semi-structured way of having a dialogue with intent. And it's much, much more than counting the number of reps. Yeah, thank you. And in your workbook, it says a specific conversational partnership where concrete action plans are developed. So we talked about that, how it's not coaching if there's no action plan. And that last word at the end, sustained change, is such a game changer as well. And here's the image for it, because the studies demonstrate that using a coach approach helps to sustain behavioral change. This is what we're trying to do in healthcare. This is what we're trying to do as fitness professionals, is to not just have this positive habit while they're working with us, but to take us out of the equation, and they're able to continue on that momentum. So that to me is a big keyword, and it's why more and more organizations and people are investing in their education and learning about the coach approach because of this piece, which is really cool. And this we saw last time too, and it really is to showcase and demonstrate how it's been so neat for me to watch people decide they'll take the training. So some people, like for me, I'm a certified coach. And when I meet with people, I'm at full dial, if that makes sense. And I'm using full coach approach. And it's been really neat to see people leave the training and figure out where their dial is. So someone that may just have 15 minutes, for example, with their client, how are they doing? How are they using the coach approach? And it's so neat that they can tap into some of the skills, some of the techniques, the mindset, and still be able to use that coach approach very effectively and have very similar impacts that I've been able to experience. So this to me has been very much an eye opener and really fun and neat to see how people are using it. Any questions so far, Etienne, that are coming up or that you may have?
Super simple.
Excellent.
If anybody has questions, feel free to ask in the chat. But no, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, fantastic. And so here I just kind of did a bit of a pause to share a story, because earlier I was talking about how a coach approach had an impact for me personally and professionally. So I'll share a quick story for both. So professionally, an example, and this would relate to your community, Etienne, of fitness professionals. So an organization that has their own company, a fitness company, reached out and shared that their biggest pain point for them was all of their clients' motivation level. That was their big rock that was preventing them to move forward and continue with their membership year after year or month after month. And so she wanted to have a program where we could try and do coaching sessions with some of her members that were interested. And we did 3 coaching sessions with those members that were interested, and it was an hour each. And later, I'll show one of the tools and give everyone access to that tool that I use to support in that very first session to identify what they wanted to work on in their coaching sessions. But it was the outcomes were phenomenal. The research actually says for coaching to really start shifting that sustained behaviors that we need about 10 coaching sessions. Well, which means 10 hours of time. Usually a coaching session can be 30 minutes to an hour. Mine on average are about 45. And so we do 3 sessions. And it was fascinating how this member, the reason they weren't registering and they had reduced their attendance had nothing to do with motivation. It was about sleep. And because a personal event had happened in their life, it was impacting their sleep. And in 3 sessions, being able to use that coaching framework, put our finger on it, help her put her finger on it, become aware. It's like, oh my gosh, this is the why, and help her come up with her own solutions to improve her sleep. Sure, I could give her some suggestions, use my expertise. However, as a suggestion, because I don't tell people what to do in coaching. And her satisfaction level went from a 2 to an 8 in 3 sessions. In terms of her sleep. So her sleep quality improved from 2 to 8 out of 10. I didn't know that we could have such dramatic results so quickly, to be honest. And I followed up with her 6 months later. Same results. So that's sustained behavioral change. It was really cool. So that's a sort of like a professional story that some of your people in your community could probably relate to with some of their clients. One personally, so for those that have kids, I've got 2, and I use an informal coach approach with my kids. And so not all the time. They're starting to pick up now, Mama, are you using your coaching hat right now? I'll say, absolutely. Do you want me to take it off? And they'll say, no, keep it on, because when you have your coaching hat on, you don't tell us what to do. But what happened was my daughter had a dilemma about she was going to a dance camp. And she had a dilemma whether she should follow her friends to go to Starbucks to get a treat or not. And she had an hour for lunch. And I said, okay, well, tell me more about what are the pros and cons for this. And I asked permission. Would you like to go through the pros and cons to help you make a decision? She said yes. So I said, okay, what's the advantage if you go to Starbucks? So she listed that. What's the disadvantage if you don't go to Starbucks? And that's when she shared, well, if I don't go to Starbucks, I don't think I'm going to have time to eat my meal properly. I won't be able to network. She didn't use the word network. It was in French as well, this conversation, but she wouldn't have been able to network with her profs, with her teachers, that she enjoyed kind of having fun with them during the lunch hour. And she says, I'm worried that I won't have energy to finish the rest of the dance lab, because it's quite intensive. They dance for like 6 to 8 hours. And so I said, now that you've talked this through and look at your pros and cons, what do you think? I think I should stay and have a good lunch and not be as stressed and be able to do all my classes and she wanted to do a good job for her teachers. And so in the beginning of this conversation, it actually started out by, Mama, what would you do? Right? And so I turned it around and tried to help her find her own decision. So it's something so simple, but I don't know that I would have used that approach if I hadn't gone through that training and kind of had that constant mindset of, Helen, don't tell people what to do. It's a sort of like a little quote we have in the training. We call it zip it up, because we call ourselves little scuba divers. Now it's in, okay, I was looking for my arrow.
Wow.
So hopefully those 2 examples are helpful and entertaining. And so this section goes more into, when should I use that coach approach? What are the challenges that my clients may have that would be my cue to maybe use that coaching card? So for those of you that may decide that to have more training in this area or already have training in this area. And on page 6 of your workbook, you can see some of those challenges. And I'd love to invite you to, and if you're watching a recording, to pause at this time as well, and to have a look to see which one of these, if any, have you experienced maybe with your clients. And so for me, when I reflect on that question, I've experienced every single barrier of my clients not moving forward because of their emotion. So they might have depression, for example. They might be very angry about what's happened to them and why they have to see me. They might the barrier might be attitude, where they might have a very pessimistic, negative attitude, and I have a hard time being able to support them because of the attitude. Motivation, big one, which is for me my barrier with the water intake. It's motivation. When my symptoms are good, I'm not motivated to drink my water. Assumptions. So someone may make an assumption about their injury and think, well, that's it. I don't think I've had a client before tell me that my doctor told me that there's no more improvement for me. So it doesn't matter. I might as well not try. And so that having those assumptions can have an impact moving forward. Judgment can have an impact as well as belief. So all of these are clients as we might come across as fitness coaches. And to me, for some people, they have assessments or screens that can help them identify if this is a barrier. And for often, your gut will tell you that this is a barrier. Often you know that I'm pretty sure we're not moving forward here because of this, but let me do a check-in to see if my assumption is correct about that. And what can I do? For me, what was tricky is what can I do? I could know that this was happening, but I didn't have the tools. What can I do? And the theme with all of this is perceptions, is how people see it. Sometimes the way we see something, all of these examples are perceptions. And so the way we see it could be the barrier. So it's not the injury, it's not the illness, it's not the disability. It could be one of these. And at this point, this is why I asked that question right at the beginning is, what is a positive change you're thinking of making or you're actively working on? I'd love to invite you to reflect on your own situation, that what could be the barrier? Is it one of this? And I just shared that for me, it's absolutely motivation. That is my barrier. So for us as well. And so this is what using that coach approach has done for me. I was explaining that with that 4-step model or framework, it's helped me to be able to dive further in this iceberg. Before, I was quite comfortable to understand and learn about people's situation, but I learned to be able to go deeper and be uncomfortable with the discomfort, because sometimes having this dialogue is not going to feel comfortable. And I've just learned to be comfortable with the discomfort, if that makes sense, and to be able to support challenging these beliefs and doing it in a way where the rapport still remains intact. And it's done very respectfully and in a way that they're ready to hear what you have to share with them because of the technique, the way you do it. And what happens if you're looking at that dive into a coach approach model image is that it helps you to go, when you challenge these perceptions, it expands your beliefs, it gives you another way of thinking, and it broadens perceptions. If one of those 3 things doesn't happen, the behavior will not be sustained. So it's almost like you need that light bulb moment to happen. Whether it's going to be directly when they're with you, sometimes you're planting the seed and asking a question, and it could be they reflect after you've had time with them. So pretty neat. And so here's that framework we were talking about. So there's many coaching frameworks. Here's one this is the one I put together. And the intent for all coaching frameworks is the same, to be able to use that semi-structured dialogue. And so these 4 steps are really designed in a way to help us have the information stick. And the more you follow this semi-structured framework, it kind of disappears in the back after a while. But to begin, it's really helpful to have something visual and have that structure. And this is one of my favorite sayings, as you know, Etienne. It really, like what coaching does is it helps you to be that co-captain. Walk away from having controls all the time and to be the expert. And it's such a humbling experience to step aside and partner with your client, dive deeper into that iceberg and get in that mindset of don't fix it, Hélène, coach it. So this image I have at the front, I look at every day as a reminder. And it says...
And this image is really something I super like of your process and your approach. It's something that relates to what we're seeing in our webinar of Hexfit, that is respecting the autonomy of the clients. And so at some point, if you take the wheel and you are driving for your clients, you are making a dependency relationship. The problem with that is at some point it will end, that's for sure. What you need is really to be on the side to help the person, the clients, to take the wheel and to make the decision they want and that they need. And on the other hand, you will stay there on the side. And it's perfectly normal with clients to have more sessions during the first 6 months, 3 months, and then to respect their autonomy and to reduce the amount of session. That's perfectly normal. It's not sad. There's not an issue into this. The issue is if the person is leaving you. You need to be there on the side to help the person to find a way, and then you are necessary. But if you try to take the wheel, and I think there's a bunch of coach or kinesiologists that right now this is what they are doing, is you are really creating a dependency that is not healthy at all.
Yeah, and I feel for many of us that are probably still doing that. Like I was so doing that 100%. And it wasn't until I learned this technique that I started to reflect and look and say, oh my gosh, am I ever holding that steering wheel? And so it wasn't until I needed to first become aware of it and realize that this is the why I'm close to burnout. This is the why. I was this close to leaving my profession that I'd worked so hard to do because I was doing too much for, even though my training is to do it, believe it or not. I was still holding on to the reins. And so, yeah, I'm glad that it resonates for you as well, because it's just, I know for me, it's reframing all that thinking and all those habits, and that visual is so helpful. And so in this last section, love to end with, really hopefully inspiring people that you don't need to have extensive training to start using this coach approach. Let's start looking at one of those techniques that you can start using immediately today with your very next client that you may have later today or tomorrow. And one of the techniques, so the image that you see right now on the screen showcases different techniques that's used in the dive into a coach approach. And so you can see the 4 steps of the framework here: the dive, the define, dive, explore, and sum up steps that we saw earlier here. And so to achieve those 4 steps of the semi-structured dialogue, these are different techniques. So the 2 techniques we'll talk about today are active listening and clarity and curiosity question. In this one here, I know you can't see the image in full color, but the full version in color, this is the only one, active listening. It's the only one that's in rose gold of all these techniques. And it's because you use it the entire way. So what we're going to finish off with is giving you some tools, some knowledge and information that you can start dialing up that active listening skill, because you are then so well on your way to using that coach approach, if that's a goal, because it is the foundation, the key to using a coach approach effectively. But that first one for clarity and curiosity questions really starts at the top of this iceberg to help us understand and learn about their situation. And if you look at page 4 of your workbook, you have some of those clarity and curiosity questions. So on page 4 of your workbook is when you've identified the behavior that you're working on currently and you're trying to change. And so I'd love to invite you on that page after the webinar, to take time to answer those questions, because you're going to get to see what those clarity, curiosity questions look like. Some of the coaching questions can look like, and you're going to coach yourself through it. So that first question, for example, so let's say Etienne is coaching me about my water intake, and he'll say, that second question, what challenges have you experienced or do you anticipate? right? So I know very well that when my symptoms are good, I will stop that behavior. And Etienne's drinking his water. I love it.
Me, totally. I have no difficulty with that point.
You do well with that one, yeah. And the next question that could be asked is, what would be the impact if you're successful in making that positive change? So that's so helpful it's such a simple question, but can be so impactful to give your client the opportunity time to reflect on that question. And that's when Etienne would find out, oh, wow, like this has a big impact. This is even going beyond being a good mom for her kids, just this simple thing as water intake. And the question number 4 is, and I have to lean forward again. Let me know if I'm not seeing it correctly. It says, what's the next best or easiest step that you can take to make this positive change? And that question is also embedded in that diving goal we were talking about earlier. And that is really to support our clients to have a successful goal that they can meet, right? What's the easiest thing, Hélène, you can do? What's the one that will have the most bang for your efforts? And by when do you want to make this change? So if you think of, for me with my water, I'd be like, I need to start making this change today. And last question is, what would help you stay accountable to this goal that you've identified? So many of my clients will say, well, you know what, maybe I need to share that I'm working on this to my partner, for example. Right? So really diving deeper and helping our clients to explore their needs and their wants through these questions. So you could use this for yourself, or feel free to use it as well for sort of like as a template, a guide to use with your clients if that's of value for you. The second technique that we find on page 7 of the workbook, the first one we did clarity and curiosity questions really quickly. Next one is that listen actively. And for me, when I did that coaching training, what I'm showing on the slide right now was really helpful for me to wrap my head around, because it's when I realized that it talks about the 3 levels of active listening. I knew what active listening was more at an implicit level, and it helped me to really understand active listening much more explicitly once I started to get training into a coach approach. And I realized that I'm living most of my time in my professional space at a level 2. I wasn't often living at the level 3. So the level 1, and just so you know, all 3 levels, there's a space for them. There's no terrible levels to be at, and we are not meant to be at level 3 that we'll talk about in a moment all the time. So level 1 is when you're focused about me. So the me is the focus is you're listening in order to talk. An example would be you're at the restaurant and they're taking, say, all of your family members' order, and you're waiting for the waiter to look at you that it's your turn. So that would be the level 1. The level 2 is more, I'm chatting with my friend and I'm going back and forth and I'm listening with the intent to respond. So right now for you, Etienne, you're probably at that level 2, right? You're listening to me and you're deciding when to chime in, and you're focused on the dialogue. The level 3 is your 100% of the time focus on the other person. And you're listening beyond the words. You're doing that piece that I call accurate empathy, and that you're trying to interpret the meaning that they have when they're sharing their story with you. So level 3 is very exhausting, just so you know. That's why you're not meant to live there all the time. When I coach, I am in level 3 all the time. And I don't do it perfectly, just so you know. It's really easy to step out of level 3. I can catch myself stepping out and I can bring myself back. So level 3 is hard. This sounds so simple, but it can be challenging. And most coaches, like say someone decides to offer a coaching service and kind of do these 3 1-hour sessions, things like that in their practice, most coaches will not book more than 4 sessions in a day. And that would be a lot for me. Yeah, because it demands all my focus, all my attention. And so on page 8 is something that I learned that really helped me to bring that active listening from explicit to implicit, and all, or vice versa, implicit to explicit. And all those 8 habits that you see on that page 8 will support us to be more in active listening. So these are all the behaviors that we need to see, that we could actually observe if someone is using that active listening. And again, when you read that list, I'd love to invite you to have a look and identify one of them that you could use and want to practice in your very next session with your client. Or maybe it's a conversation that you're about to have with a friend or family member. For me, I will share the one I tried right off the gate was the second one, which is asking open-ended questions versus questions that require a yes or no. So that idea of open-ended versus closed-ended. And my challenge that I did at that time, my kids were 4 and 6, and I did a challenge for an entire week to do not ask your kids, Hélène, and actually I did it kids and beyond. Everyone around me, I was not allowed. I gave myself a rule. I can't ask a question that needs a yes or no answer. And when I did, I thought that can't be done. There's no way I can do this. So I realized that it absolutely can be done. And a lot of the times I would catch myself about to ask a yes, no question, but I could open up that question and make it open-ended. And what I realized is it helped I remember at that time, my best friend I'd known for 10 years, and I got to know her at a deeper level because I stopped asking those yes, no questions. So it's kind of neat. And so we can really, an easy, simple technique that can help to build those lasting relationships with our clients and well beyond our clients, as you see from this example that I shared with my friend. So that's the request that I'd love to leave the group with, is what habits on that page 8 would you want to dial up in your very next session? And when I make a request in the coaching world, it means it's something you can accept, you can decline, or you can change the terms. So you absolutely do not need to do it. It's absolutely simply an invitation as you look at that page 8. And love to leave people with some tools and hopefully help to dial up that confidence to use that coach approach. And so this is a free tool that is available to you and that you can retrieve going on that website. I think you're going to provide the link.
Yeah, so the link right now should be on your bottom left of your page, if I well remember. So you can just click on download your free tool. And perfect. That's that easy.
Perfect. Easy peasy. Great setup. And so I'll just walk you through how I've used that tool. And that one of the pages on that tool looks like a wheel like this. And so this wheel of health and well-being for me is something I've incorporated in my practice from right at the beginning, midway to do a check-in, and at the end to do outcome measures. So that client I was mentioning to you earlier that we use in a fitness coaching company, I used that tool on the very first session. And what it helped me do is to see which areas did she want to focus on. And you'll notice the page before you see the wheel, there are whole bunch of categories that your client could pick, and they're all categories that as fitness professionals you have the ability to support them with. There's so many things you can do for your clients, and so there's a big list, and you're inviting your client to look at that list and choose and tone down that list. They can pick 2, they can pick all the way to 8. This client, just because we knew we had only 3 sessions, I asked her to pick 3. She couldn't pick just 3, she picked 4. And it was so fascinating, and I'm glad that we picked 4, because of the entire 3 session, all we focused on was sleep on the topic. So when I went and redid the wheel with her, every single area. I shared earlier that the sleep improved from, I think earlier in my story, I said 2 and it went to 8. This is actually 0. She was actually a 0 and it went to 8. And so it was interesting to see we never talked about flexibility. We never talked about spirituality. We never talked about nutrition. No action plans were done in any of those 3 categories. But at the end, when we did the outcome, I was quite surprised that every single one of those improved because she worked. So a lot of this stuff is quite kind of intertwined, as we know. So that was kind of neat. And so this is another way to download that tool. So this, I'm showing a QR code that's also found in that workbook that you're downloading. And so you have access to that tool, and it's an exclusive page that I put together, Etienne, for your community. And there's one more tool that I want to be adding in there. So I definitely would invite people to check it from time to time, because I will always, my tools always get updated. So you'll have the recent versions in there and all that good stuff. But I think that's it for me. It's in a nutshell. Just finishing off with that, my code. Yeah. The references are in the book if you're interested.
Really good.
And the best way to reach me.
Exactly. Really good. And I really advise everybody to reach you directly, scan the code or do a connection on LinkedIn with Hélène. But clearly, thanks again, Hélène, for everything you have showed us again today. I know we have done it in French. If somebody was also French, you can find it back. But as last time, you're giving us so much content, so much real advice that we can truly put in action tomorrow, that it's really relating to the kind of webinar that we want at Hexfit, webinars that truly help. So people, I hope you have downloaded the free tool. There was the link in the chat and I put it on the left. If you are not downloading it, or if you were walking and so you're not able to download it, feel free to communicate with us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you want. It will be a pleasure for us to just give it back to you, the link and everything.